Today's guest is Dimitrius Lynch. He's the founder and principal architect at LYNES. Dimitris, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Pat. Looking forward to this. It's been a while. We were trying to get this going, but finally we were able to make it happen. So glad to be here.
No, it's good. I know. I always see you posting stuff with your various episodes. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to diving deeper into your background. So the first question I have is, I mean, you've been an architect for a while. Is this something that you always wanted to do? Like, what were your kind of first sort of dreams as a kid? Like, what did you want to be as a kid?
That's a funny question. At one point I wanted to be a carpet cleaner. And then what else did I want to be? A couple other random things. And then I finally landed on architecture. But it actually stems back to third grade when I was in school. I went to a unique school that did a lot of education on African culture and history, African American history. And one of the classes that we had was ancient Egyptian civilization. And we went into this whole project as a class where we built a large scale pyramid, and we learned a lot of African songs, and we did this whole burial ceremony of our made up king, who was like a GI Joe that we wrapped up as a mummy. But we did this whole ceremony and procession after we built the pyramid. And it was a pretty cool project where, you have the four-sided pyramid, but we made it so that the inside could actually open it up, and there was like a base with a glass bottom, and you could see this pathway that you would go to like the actual tomb within the pyramid. So we created this whole thing and had this procession and ceremony, and in this project, we learned about the history around pyramids and certain individuals. And one was Imhotep, who was in certain circles considered a god of architecture. And in my third grade brain, I was like, ooh, I could be a god. So it just that was probably one of the early seeds. And then throughout my life, I had been pretty good at drawing and loved math. And at some point, a counselor kind of said, those two things make architect. So I think around 10th grade or so, I started to really think about it seriously and kind of go down that direction, and been committed ever since and just kept going.
Yeah, I mean, when you take it from an educational background to the real world of architecture, what sort of things did you learn early on that were kind of different from what the theory was?
Yeah, extremely different. Architecture in school is not like architecture in real life, and I think it's mostly the constraints of reality, budget, zoning codes, all those different various things of reality that have no real. I mean, they have some classes that have some of that instituted, but are implemented, but it's not like real life at all. And you have like these elaborate concepts that you come up with in studio in school, and you just don't really get that opportunity in real life unless you're under, one of the architect companies like Zaha Hadid's company or Gary or some of those that have built a career where they can express these crazy concepts and things like that. But usually it takes a while to even get to that part much later in your career. So I'm quite a ways away from even getting to explore some of the stuff that I did in school in real life.
Yeah, so there was no class of all the things that could go wrong on a project?
Yeah, that too. Oh, I have so many stories just off of a project I'm working on now. It's crazy. So it's not it's yeah, it's definitely not reflective of reality.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that can go wrong that commonly happen in general?
Um, one of the big things that I tend to deal with is working with the city officials, building inspectors. They tend to have their own preferences and things that they like or don't like. Sometimes it's based in actual code. Sometimes it's their interpretation of the code that's not uh, reflective of my opinion of what the code says. So you have to sometimes have conversations to sort of come to some understanding and middle ground or figure out exactly what their issue is and help mitigate whatever the issue is that they have, just to move the project along. And the other thing that I think is probably a big one is coordination between teams. It's extremely, it's probably one of the more common issues because buildings have gotten so much more complex over time that you have to have all these various teams and expertise, experts approaching the project or the problem from various different perspectives and making sure that everyone's doing the same thing, working in the same direction can be difficult to wrangle sometimes. So that's just something that takes a lot of attention to make sure that everybody's moving in the same direction.
Yeah, so you mentioned that interpretations of the code. I guess it's important to have a lot of local knowledge of the areas outside just what's written in the code to really be able to navigate that.
Yeah, especially LA. LA is notoriously difficult in our area. Um, it's just a big machine, and they have lots of inspectors that within them look at things differently. But they also have we this is like a running joke amongst a lot of people that work in LA. But within the city, they have these bulletins. They're called bulletins of documents that are circulating within the plan check community there, but it's not anywhere that is really apparent that you would know to go check, and you don't see it until whichever plan checker takes issue with it, and then they show you this bulletin. Like, well, I would have never known this, and you have to try and navigate that bulletin, whatever it is, to get past whatever the hangup is.
Well, so you're designing a project. There's certain costs involved, and then last minute there could be something that's not, apparent. You run into the issue, and then it's a difficult conversation to try to navigate that so your client doesn't get burned, and you can make this happen.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the project types that we ran into a lot of this with is it's something called small lot development, where you're basically building buildings very close to each other, like less than a foot, and because it's sort of a new product type within the area, there's a lot of figuring it out on the fly. So that's where a lot of these bulletins have come into place and their interpretation of how to handle these projects. So it's just kind of a learning process, especially with some of these newer type of projects because we're completely out of, well, not completely, but we're running low on land here. So people are getting creative, developers are getting very creative with how they approach the projects. The city has to sort of adapt to that.
Oh, I guess so that and on top of the fact that there's lots of these bulletins that people don't have access to. There's new bulletins being created for new things that come up because of the creativity that's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, interesting. Um, that is, yeah, it is definitely, I guess, has a lot to do with working with someone that's navigated this before. If they've done a certain project in an area, there's a greater chance and that they know the inspector that would be in charge and be able to sort of navigate that project, well because they've been through the headaches, quote unquote.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you if you're approaching a project and definitely want to try to find someone that's been through it before, because, like you said, when you go through all of the headaches, you know what to look for the next time you go through. Like one project that I'm dealing with right now is in a plaza, and I think we've probably had the hardest time of anyone dealing with the inspectors. Just kind of crazy situations. So next time around, if I get to work on another project within that plaza, I know what could possibly, not saying that it will be an issue, but I know what could be an issue, and I can make sure to mitigate those well in advance so we don't have that problem.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one of the themes in your podcast, your series I see coming out is you're looking at ways for trades and designers to work closer together. So yeah, I know you've talked to a lot of different people about this. I mean, what are some of the themes that come up in terms of the design community working better with the trades?
The biggest thing is really just understanding what each other are going through. Um, and there has been a lack of that historically. Everybody assumes their job is other people's jobs are easier. So they sort of, you know, harbor these feelings of like, why didn't this person do that? Um, and that tends to, there just creates this friction and lack of understanding of each other's um, tasks and the effort that they're putting in to manage the work that they have. So what we're trying to do is just create a platform where each different trade designer come in and talk about what it is that they do, some of the pain points that they run into, and opportunities or issues that they may run into with specific trades or other designers. So had a few people that talk about, there was a civil engineer that talked about the designers not understanding what it's really like in the field. And that kind of goes into another tangent of how we train our people coming in, um, but not understanding what happens in the field. And I think that's probably one of the biggest themes on the designer to trade side is designers not knowing exactly what their drawing is creating in the field, whether it be process of how things come together, actually what you're drawing, if it really works, so those sort of things. So that kind of comes back to how do we train um, our designers earlier on because the younger staff are the ones that are doing a lot of the work, but they don't understand what they're drawing. So how do you get them up to speed, or how do you shift some of that work around to make sure you're putting out a good project, a good product to build off
Yeah, I mean, so on the other side of the coin, the trades have these sort of challenges with the design. What about the designers with the trades? What do the trades, not understand or the disconnect?
from the opposite
Yeah,
direction. There's a lot of the trades not actually looking through the drawings. So there are, there's details, there's information there, but in the field, people tend to pick up, a few sheets that they think are applicable to them, rather than looking at the entire project to understand how things are going to come together. That there are details in the back, or whatever the case is. They don't look at the whole picture, so they hone in only on their particular scope, and it's sort of tunnel vision. And sometimes that can't go together exactly the way that um, they they think that it should, or in their mind, um, kind of feel like it should be laid out. So there's a little bit of disconnect there. So a lot of that, a lot of what I have seen is that people just tend to not understand what's in the set and all the information that's provided. Uh, so they tend to send you a bunch of phone calls or say, "Oh, that I didn't see that." Um, that information's not here. And like, well, did you look at page whatever? Details there, it explains exactly what to do. They're like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was back there.
Yeah, no, I can visualize what you're talking about. I think I experienced that, you know, firsthand sometimes day in and day out. So I know what you're talking about. Now, you've created, you're an architect, but you've also do podcasts and create a lot of media. How's that fitting together? I'm always curious when people are, working on content and, engaging the community and developing that out. But how is that all working together for you?
Um, so that question can go a couple different ways. Do you mean physically how I make it happen, or how is it working as a system?
As a system?
Okay. So as a system, they kind of work together in that I'm doing a lot of exploration with the podcast, talking to a lot of people. So it's broadening my scope and my understanding of our industry as a whole exponentially. Every episode I do, every season we finish, I understand things so much more that I can apply to my business, as well as all the other podcasts that I listen to. But I think that helps me out in a business front and how I approach putting a project together. There's certain little things that I learn talking to people that are in the field, understanding what their pain points are. So now I'm trying to figure out, like we were just talking about, trades not um, seeing the full scope of their project. How do I reconstruct my set to bring all the information that they need to a few pages that they can break out? If the concrete guy's just looking at the slab, how do I get all of that information that he needs to that one section? We try not to duplicate information because if something changes, then you have to chase that through the set. So how do I make it happen where a piece can be broken out, but if that information also needs to be shared with another trade, how do you get that to replicate throughout without duplicate too much? So a lot of that is sort of in a planning process and trying to figure it out. But going through this podcast has helped bring a lot of that to my attention, and a lot of it's kind of further down the line of actual execution. But that's one front, and then the other front is it does get my name out there. People do stumble across me through the podcast, and I have gotten work off of it. So um, kind of works on two fronts.
Yeah. So, from a high level trends perspective, you may have touched on some of this. What, from the design side, where do you see things going? I mean, sometimes when you, from my perspective, when you see magazines, you see very glossy things on on that are happening. But like, what are the key trends that you're really tracking going forward?
Um, it's kind of hard to say because things are, as you know, are moving very fast right now. Like it feels like everything, every single topic you can think of is moving extremely fast. So it's hard to really know exactly what's going to shake out for sure. I think some big markers to pay attention to, efficiency is huge. How do you deliver a project much more efficiently, both time and cost? So there are a lot of products that are coming to market of prefabricated homes, prefabricated units that will plug into a hotel building, um, things like that are happening. The other one of the other topics is adaptive reuse. Now that we understand that we can work from home in a lot of roles, what happens to office space and some of the and some buildings that may shift completely and not use whatever the building was that they used to. Now what happens to those buildings? Can we turn those into housing or some sort of community space? um, how do we salvage those without having to demo, waste a bunch of stuff that's already out there? So I think those are two things that are going to be huge. And then technology obviously is changing daily. So it's hard to know what exactly is going to be the one to rise above the rest, but there's a lot of things happening on the technology front of different companies that are making moves. So just keeping an eye out on those, try to see what works best for your company and the processes that you have. Um, just paying attention there.
Yeah, for sure. No, you make some good points. Now, I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs always go through adversity. What sort of adversity have you faced?
Oh, lots. How do I give you a couple? um, I think one of the biggest things, I'll give you this one. This is the biggest one for me is patience. And from the lens of with social media, um, tend to see a lot of what other people are doing. You don't really you don't really understand how much time they've actually put in. So they come on your radar when they're, nearing completion and really being big. Um, but it appears that they came out of nowhere and it only took a year to get to where they are. But in reality, like I'm looking at one particular business, for example, I got an opportunity to look at some of their documents. They've just hit my radar in 2020, I think, but some older documents from like 2003. So they've been at this for so long. And I'm sure there are points where they were like, this is stupid. This is going nowhere. I should just quit and go back and work for my old boss or whatever. Um, so I think patience is a huge thing to understand that, everybody's journey is not going to be the same. It's going to be long. It's going to be difficult. So you'll see other people, but you have to sort of refocus and understand that they probably have been working at this for a long time. So you're just at the beginning stages. It's going to be a while. Just keep at it. Take those small steps and get there. So constantly reminding myself is a constant battle. So but
Oh,
I've been kind of dealing with it.
that's so true. I think, even if you know it for a second, it's easy to slip back into like, oh, I need to do more. And there's just no end to more for sure. I totally understand what you're talking about. I hear people say, I don't like my boss. I'm going to start a business. And I think, oh no, please don't, if that's the
Yeah,
reason.
yeah, it's not the right motivation at all.
It's a lot tougher as an entrepreneur. So, I mean, where do you see all the stuff you're doing going? Because you have a lot of things that you're involved in.
Yeah. So the tree is I have my architectural practice as lines. From that, I have the Basis podcast, which is sort of a media outlet of learning and exploring and sharing all this just different information about the building industry. And then I've also co-founded Cable Media, which is sort of a expansion of that idea of sharing knowledge through media podcasting, and have basically created a network of creators that are doing a lot of podcasts right now. I think we have eight. A majority of them are sort of in the architecture vein, but anybody in the industry can find something from those. And they vary in topics from technology, practice to day-to-day marketing, just business stuff. So you could find anything there, but we're trying to gear it towards the AEC industry, and that's sort of a bigger platform of trying to shift the conversation of art industry, because I've found that, if you look at the landscape of media and tied to professions, majority of professions are presented in this very romantic way, and it shows that these professions are very difficult, and you know people are very willing in real life are willing to spend the money on doctors and lawyers. They see them all glamorized on TV or whatever the various outlets are. For us, we very rarely get the AEC person presented in a media form, and if you do, it's either very complicated to where no one understands what's going on and it kind of glaze over, or you have the other end of like HTTP where it presents what we do is very easy and summed up in half an hour. So everybody feels like they can do it on their own, which devalues our industry. So we're trying to build something that presents our industry a little more accurately and talks about the day-to-day grind and moving things 1 inch to make it a little bit better to the large concept that presents a project that is something for the client. So we're trying to do that and that represents our industry a little bit better.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, what's the best piece of advice you've received?
Um, hmm. Well, the advice that I received was that kicked this off, which I will say is the best so far, was that the pain, what was it? Something along the lines of the pain of staying, and the pain of staying becomes greater than the pain of leaving, then you'll leave. And I think that's kind of true to life. When it comes to making a change, you have to really be in tune with whatever you're doing with. If it becomes so painful that you're like, I'm just going to take the risk, I'm willing to take the risk. You hit that threshold, and just to be mindful of, I'm willing to take a risk rather than do the same thing over and over again. I think that was one of the things that kind of kicked off my new phase of life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have covered?
Um, way that you phrase that, it makes me think of so many different things.
The buffet, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Pick one. What's something that you want to mention?
Um, I think one other thought that I will share is that um, if you're approaching whatever task or project or anything like that, I think one of the biggest things that I've understood over time is you can realistically only get 1 to 2 things done a day, and with the way that technology has advanced to having emails and direct message and Slack and all these other things that people can get a hold of you immediately, all those things are their task list on their time. They want the responses right now and everything. You have your task list, and you have to prioritize your task list. I do this every day. I write out what my list is. I do 1, 2, 3, all the way down. And I focus, I'm going to get at least 1 and 2 done today. And then all the other stuff is when I can get to it. So I think managing that is probably one of the biggest things